everybody, welcome back. So if you haven't guessed already, this is Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. To start with, I'm using my Benefit Roller Eye Bright Pencil to map out the shapes around the face. Inevitably, the paintwork will overlap the lines, but to begin with, paint around the lines so you can see where everything needs to be. So this is where the eyes are going to be. Now we want to paint over our natural eyes. In the daylight, it's going to be quite obvious where your natural eye socket is. You'll be able to see a little line where your lid is closed. However, presumably this would be worn in an evening setting, so your eyes will become invisible. I'm drawing from a cartoon, so I'm also including the shadows on the face. So this won't necessarily make sense right now, but once you start seeing it come together, you'll understand the shapes. I'm going to colour in the eyes. You can leave this till last. I found I needed this to gain, again, proportions for the face. If you're following along with the tutorial, leave it till last because you'll get less creasing that way. I obviously had this on for the whole duration, so you will get a little bit of creasing. At the end of the day, it's still just face paint. I would just say before you go out, layer it with a white eyeshadow and that will help prevent the creasing a little bit more. I'm using a Superstar white face paint and I'm applying 2 layers, but again, as we go through the tutorial, you'll see it does start to move a little bit. At the very end of the tutorial, I would apply a white eyeshadow to set it in place a little bit more for durability. Moving on to the base, I'm taking the Flash palette by Makeup Forever and I'm mixing this kind of turquoisey blue shade with a bit of white. This is going to be our base makeup. If you've watched my Halloween tutorials over the years, you'll know my preference is cream because I like to be able to blend on top of cream. But of course you can absolutely substitute this just for face paints, it's completely up to you. So ordinarily this whole face would be covered in this one shade and then you would work on top of that. But as mentioned earlier, I don't want to lose the shapes that I've put onto the face so I don't lose the proportion of what I've drawn. That's why you'll see me butting the paint up to the lines and not actually crossing over them just yet. Another reason I like to use creams is because you can see the opacity is a lot stronger than a face paint, so you don't have a wishy-washy finish. You can see the areas that I've left at the moment are the eyelids, the scars and also the shadows across the side of the nose. Now moving on to a black face paint, again this is by Superstar. I'm using a fine paintbrush to line around the top of the eye and also around the bottom half on the outer edges of both eyelids, and then I'm thickening the top line around the eyeball. Think of this as an eyeliner that you would normally wear on your top lid but on your big eyeball that you've now created. As you can see, this is going across your eyebrow, so use the very tip of the brush to work that in between the tiny hairs until you get it as crisp as you can, considering it is going across your brow. Then you want to sketch around this top shape that we've created, which is going to be her eyelid. Don't worry about this being too crisp at the moment because we're going to fill this in with the same shade that we've applied to the face, and we're also going to be working over this with some shadow, so we will need to replace this line again to make it more defined in a little while. For the main amount of shading, I'm taking the Huda Beauty Mint Pastel Obsessions palette, and we're taking this flat mint green shade on a small brush and we're going to start working this on the eyelid space. I'm doing this above and below the main line that is the eyelid and also above the eyeliner. Because you are working this on top of creams, you do need to use more of a patting motion rather than a complete swiping motion, because if you use a heavy hand when you do the swiping, you're going to remove that base because we've not set it in place. So a stipple motion definitely works best and you'll find that that blends into the cream really nicely. Here I'm just applying some eyeshadow around the bottom half of the eyelid, which just makes this area look a little bit more three-dimensional, but this is something we're going to work back into. I'm now taking a little bit of white cream and applying this into the eyelid space in the centre to give it a bit of a highlight. Again, this is playing with light and shadow to create a three-dimensional effect, but it is a work in progress, so it's something that you're going to apply and come back to and reapply and come back to. Now the face is quite flat in terms of the blue shade that we've applied, so we do want to apply some highlight, and I'm going to do that using a white cream. To not disturb that base makeup, I'm using a stipple motion again, and I'm tapping this through the centre of the face, same sort of way that we would highlight our natural skin tone using a lighter concealer. I'm building up the intensity around the main areas where the eyelid would sink slightly because we're creating a shadowed appearance. Don't be tempted to go straight in with a black to create the shadow because it can be too intense. When you look at the contours of our own faces where our eyelids crease, the actual crease isn't black, it's just a darker shade of the skin tone where it looks like it's slightly shadowed, so you want to do the same when you're creating characters. So you'll see me applying a contour shade which is a darker shade of the skin tone, and then when I want to intensify that colour I will add a tiny amount of black to the green, so it's not just black but it's a darker form of that green, which is what I'm doing here in the socket of the eyelid. So it's all about slowly building. If you went straight in with the black it would be too charcoaly on the skin and it wouldn't have the same effect, so you do need to mix it with the colours that you're applying. And you'll see here that I've applied the black, but I'm now layering over that with the mint green. So by having that black underneath, although it's not super visible, that mint green now looks so much more intense than it originally did when it was applied first. I'm adding some white highlight down the centre of the nose before going in with some black face paint to create the first stitch line that we've got on the forehead. Don't worry about the black line being too crisp or straight because you're going to go back in and perfect it after you've done the stitches. So we just want the base line first, and then we're going to go in with 4 white stitches across the forehead, making sure that they crisscross directly over the line that you've created. As I mentioned, face paint can come out a little bit wishy-washy, so sometimes you need to apply 2 layers, allow that first layer to dry and then go back in with a second layer. So looking at my reference image on the cartoon, all of the shading is to the right side of the face as you look at it. So I'm doing mine on the right side as you look at my face. So I'm making sure that the shadows and the stitches are on the same side as the shading on the rest of the face. Again, if you want these to look relatively realistic and 3D, then it is a work in progress. Do the majority of the stitches first on all of them, then come back and work on some little other bits, and then you can just tweak them to make them as perfect as you want them. That's exactly what I did. Using some white paint, I'm applying a highlight along either side of the black line, and then I'm also adding some of the mint eyeshadow to create a bit of a contour and shadow to make it almost look more like a lip. Once I laid down the initial green, I then went in with a small brush with a tiny bit of the blue from the base makeup to pat it in so it looks like a bit more of a softer gradient. I then decided to tweak the black line to make it look as if the skin was being pulled in by the stitches, so I widened each section of the black line to look more oval rather than straight. Again, this is something you can do from the off rather than drawing a dead straight line. It's a work in progress, so it's something that I was doing as I was going along, and I felt like it worked better if the skin looked like it was being pulled in. So I'm now redefining the highlights on either side of the skin, and the shading's already there because I'd already applied the green eyeshadow, so I don't need to do that again just yet. So I'm moving on to the next stitch. I'm applying a bit of shading around the area that the stitch would go into the skin, and then softening that off with a smaller brush that has the base shade on. Going in with a tiny brush, I'm applying black to the very base of each stitch, which gives it a really deep shadow, making it look like it actually goes into the skin. Then you want to create a little bit more shadow just slightly further back from that, because if something of that size really did go under the skin, it would lift it slightly, which would cause a natural shadow. Be patient with this step because each little section really does make the world of difference, but it can take a little while to create, and there are a fair few stitches on the face, so this is going to be quite repetitive. The great thing about working with creams is that if you make a mistake, you can really kind of just tap out the eyeshadow and blend it back into the base and start again. Here I decided I wanted to apply a bit more of a highlight to the centre of the forehead. So again, because it's creams, it's really easy to blend into. I'm applying a light base with a slightly bigger brush and then going with a blending brush to buff that into the eyeshadow that we've already applied. So you can see the area around the eyes now is looking much more three-dimensional and realistic rather than flat. For the area that I've left with no paint on, I'm going in with the base colour first. This is going to be the foundation for our shading. Taking a flat shaded brush, I'm applying the mint shade all over the same area that we've just applied the base colour. This is going to deepen it while also semi-setting it, and it's going to layer it, which is going to give it more longevity. That's our darker skin colour laid down. We're then going to tap in a little bit of black and the mint mixed together to deepen this further and make it look more like a shadow. On my reference image, the darkest part is around this area on the nose and a little bit just off of the nose above the top lip. We're going to completely cover this in the darker shade. I'm also going to take that from the bridge of the nose up into the top of the eye socket above where we've applied her eyelid. And you want to round this off so it looks like the eye socket is in that rounded shape. Now we're going to move on to the eyelashes. Now you can just paint these on by hand and create a bit of shadow around them to make them look three-dimensional. I decided to run around the house and look for some black paper, and I cut out 8 V shapes. Each one varies ever so slightly in length. You could use little pipe cleaners, you can use paper, again you can hand paint them on, it's up to you. This way is very effective, it's very lightweight so it's easy to stick to your face and it's not heavy like it's going to fall off. I did use the Eyelure Lash and Line Glue pen, but I did stick a little bit of eyelash glue onto each paper before applying it to my face, just for security. Now I'm going in and deepening the lines around the eyes to make this area look a little bit more prominent and as if there is more structure to the face, but she's also got a couple of little light wrinkles around the eyes, so I'm using a tiny fine liner pen dipped in white paint to create highlights. Now I'm going to add some shadow around the face because again we want that to look three-dimensional, so we are adding in a little bit more of the darker mint with a little bit of the black to sculpt and create shadows around the cheeks. I'm also going to enhance the filtrum by applying shadow to one side of it. Next I'm moving on to the second scar along the face. This one I did extend down to the jawline, but I decided not to make it that long and instead join it up with the one that comes from the mouth. This time you can see once I draw the black lines, I already extend the black into oval shapes rather than a straight line, just for ease and quickness. You want to do the same on the other side of the mouth, only it doesn't come down from the eye on this side. Under this left eye I'm creating a bit of shadow and then tapping that in with the brush that has a little bit of the base colour on. And then this section of the cheek I'm applying a bit more of the white cream to add a highlight to make it look more rounded. I'm adding shading to the right side of the top lip and in turn enhancing the highlight on the top of the filtrum. It's really important when you're creating a look that has highlight and shadow to actually paint what you see. It might feel obscure and not look necessarily right at the beginning, but once you finish the look it will come together as long as you paint what you see. On the left side of the face underneath the scar I'm creating a shadow using the mint with a tiny bit of the black, and this is going on both the top and bottom of the scar. Then to slightly round off the bottom half of the face and give it a bit of dimension around the jaw, I'm taking a fluffy blending brush dipped into a mix of the mint and the black, and I'm creating shadow around the jawline and the chin. So I'm going to whiz through the stitches around the mouth because you've already seen how I've created it. I don't want to completely deprive you of seeing it come together. So I'm laying down the highlights first. I'm also going to apply some highlights on this side of the nose to contrast against the shaded side that we've got. I'm also taking this down the right side of the filtrum as well as the left side of the top lip. So you have to imagine that this is the side that the light will be coming from. I'm also going to apply a little bit of highlight between the eyelashes on the lid. Then I'm going to move on to colouring in the stitches and I'm going to whiz through it and then I'll be back. So Sally's lips are quite vivid purple in the centre, so I'm using an ultraviolet pink which I'm then going to blend in with some black eyeliner and then I'm going to pat over that with eyeshadow. And the idea is that these lips, if you are out in the dark or you go somewhere with any kind of black light or UV light, they are going to look nice and vivid. You want to make sure that the cupid's bow is quite prominent and the bottom lip comes down a bit like a rosebud. Then use your brush to pull the black kohl pencil down into the lip colour. I'm using one by Zoeva because it's really soft, which makes it really easy to blend. Then I'm going back into my Certified palette to take the shade Remedy and Potion, which is a maroon and a black, to pat over the top. This is going to secure the lipstick in place, making sure it doesn't wear, but also just deepen it a little bit. Using the black face paint, I'm going around the jawline and down the sides of my neck, leaving the centre with no colour on. This is just going to give the illusion that the face is more tapered to a point and also that the neck is tiny. Then we're going to fill that space with the blue base that we used on the face, and this again is going to make it look as if the neck is there but as though it's only an inch wide. Then taking a fluffy blending brush, I'm creating a shadow down one side of the neck. The idea is that this makes that little neck look more three-dimensional. Again, much like the face, adding highlight and contour is really going to benefit this look. Sally also has the same scar across the neck, so you want to create the same as we have done on the face, this time with only 3 little stitches. Then once you've done that, you can pop on a long red wig that's straight, repaint the eyes white, set them with a white eyeshadow, and then you can just dip the end of your brush into some black paint and pop that on as pupils. You want to make sure they're both facing in the same direction, otherwise she'll have googly eyes, more so than she already has.